Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dog Life Radio. Episode 27 coming at you right about now. I am your host, Rossi Giugio. Thank you for joining us. We have got another excellent edition teed up for you this week. We have Bellator's Brooke Mayo. Brooke the Bully Mayo, flyweight 125-pounder fighting for Bellator. Had a great conversation with her. I believe it was yesterday. But nonetheless, we've got that coming up momentito. So with that, before that, I just wanted to take a moment just to remind everybody that I am on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, all at Dog Life Radio. So please check me out and follow me there. As well as if you feel the need, the urge, the inkling, the sensation to write the podcast, please do so at dogliferadio@yahoo.com. Try to keep things simple, consistent, make it easier for y'all, right? Yeah, who loves you? Now, before we jump into that conversation, I do need to take a pause for the cause, as my man Stone Cold Steve Austin would say. We've got to pay a few bills. I want to say the official sponsor of the podcast. We are powered by Death Wish Coffee. Not a gimmick, folks. Real coffee at deathwishcoffee.com. With strongest caffeine content you are going to find on the market. Blows the doors off of anything that you're going to find around here. On the East Coast, it's much better than any of that donut brand that you're drinking. Trust me on this one. Check them out. They've got two roasts. I prefer the darker roast, which is the flagship Death Wish Coffee. And they also have a more medium roast called the Valhalla Java, or the Odin Force blend. Both of them are fantastic. I've had them both, but again, I like that darker roast. I like big, bold coffee with strong flavor, and this does it. So check them out. And you know what? They're more than a coffee company, aren't they? They've got a podcast, too.
Hello, faithful podcast listener. I'm the Incredible Jeff.
And I'm the Amazing D-Man.
And together, we host Fueled by Deathcast, a weekly podcast show from Death Wish Coffee Company, the makers of the world's strongest coffee.
That's right, and you can find us every Thursday on deathwishcoffee.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, Google Music, and more.
And watch us live on the Death Wish Coffee Company Facebook page and check out all our videos on YouTube.
We bring you the latest interesting news in the science world, an exclusive look at the world's strongest coffee company, and a special guest every week.
The guests could be rock stars, actors, authors, athletes, or even astronauts, and we ask them all the question, what fuels you?
So tune in every week to find out the answer, get inspired, and fuel your passion with Fueled by Deathcast.
All right, we're recording. It's rolling. We're live.
Awesome. How are you?
All right, so I'm doing very well. Brooke Mayo, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here on Dog Life Radio. For those of you who are new to Dog Life, Brooke Mayo is a current flyweight, that's 125 fighter for Bellator. So welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. It's really great to have people from all walks of life on the show. I love talking about health and wellness, and one of my passions is mixed martial arts. So I wanted to ask you, Brooke, how did you even get into mixed martial arts? I know you were a collegiate athlete. I believe it was soccer, but could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved?
Yeah, so I played soccer since I was 5, and my whole life goal was to play D1 soccer in college and then to go on and play professionally abroad or, in the States, depending on if they had, a pro women's league going on at that point. Unfortunately, I had a really tough surgery. I had compartment syndrome. Well, technically it's called chronic exertional compartment syndrome, meaning your muscle gets too big for the fascia that surrounds the muscle. So I just kind of got really big, especially my lower legs. So if you guys have seen me walking around, I have really giant calves, and ended up having to need surgery to basically take some pressure off of my muscle that was being squeezed by my fascia. So after I had surgery, it was kind of a tough recovery, and I wasn't really getting back to playing like I wanted to, so I ended up having to quit soccer and find something else that was going to keep me busy. So I tried Pilates and I tried biking, and then, I wasn't really getting the competitive aspect of sports that I wanted. I was still like, you know, a very competitive person and still in my mind very athletic. So I kind of wanted to put that towards, you know, something. And somebody suggested jiu-jitsu to me, and I had no martial arts background whatsoever. Like, I didn't even do karate as a kid. I just kind of stuck to, you know, the typical basketball, soccer sports growing up. So when I started jiu-jitsu, I went in there completely, you know, a complete blank slate, but I ended up loving it and becoming addicted to it. And within like 2 or 3 months, I was already talking about competing and fighting in an MMA fight. So people were like, wait, you went from like, you know, knowing absolutely nothing to doing 3 months of jiu-jitsu and thinking you can become a fighter. And I'm like, no, I think I really could. Like, you know, I'm tough and I really, you know, I just love the sport, and I was always a fan of MMA. So that's how my interest kind of got sparked, was through jiu-jitsu.
Oh, fantastic. So how long were you training before you decide, before, like, you know, you walk into the school's doors and you start training in jiu-jitsu? How long from there to the point where you put on the gloves and you got into a cage?
So when I first started training jiu-jitsu, unfortunately, someone broke my right ulna. So I didn't understand, like, when I was first starting out, that was another thing I didn't understand, was that your training partners don't always care about you as much as you care about them. So okay. I was training with a 300-pound dude. Like, he's a really big guy. He's like a purple belt. And I was a white belt, so I was like, oh, he's a purple belt. He really knows what he's doing. He has control, right? So he grabbed my wrist and tried to do an arm drag, and as he twisted and pulled my arm, he spiral broke my right ulna. So that kind of delayed my, you know, my MMA debut, and like also me even just training my striking. So when I first, you know, started like, you know, putting the gloves on and doing all that, it wasn't until I want to say like a year after starting jiu-jitsu, and it was very like, how do I put this? It wasn't like I went to a big, you know, organized gym and trained. It was like training in a garage with some dudes that also liked fighting. It wasn't your typical start, I guess you would say, to a martial arts or a mixed martial arts career. It was like I said, I didn't really have a ton of background or knowledge on what I was getting myself into, so I kind of would just test things out and go to Stockton and spar with some guys. And you know, I didn't really have like an organized coach per se or team until I want to say 2 years into training. I had 3 amateur fights, but my very first one, my friends were in my corner, and they were just telling me, like, just stand and bang, like, just stand and throw down, don't go to the ground. It was so funny. So I want to say the first year was very unorganized, very kind of just fly by the seat of my pants when it came to like fighting and to training. And then I want to say, like maybe 2 years into jiu-jitsu and a year into MMA, that's when I, you know, got a coach and like started, you know, focusing more on the technique side of things, because I knew, like, even though I didn't know that much about martial arts, I knew that like I needed technique. I needed somebody that was going to guide me and make me a very technical stand-up fighter as well as a technical ground fighter. So yeah, that's the start of things was very crazy and very chaotic. Let's just put it that way.
Well, it sounds it, but obviously it didn't dampen your love of the sport, so you continued on. And from going from those, I guess from your words, the chaotic start all over the place, kind of just jumping in and trying to learn, to where you're now. You're fighting. Are you still fighting out of Team Alpha Male out in California?
So that ended up not really working out for me. I really like Team Alpha Male. They're great people. I just feel as if the gym in itself was a little bit too big for me. I went from like I said, like small like groups of like, you know, 3 to 5 people training max to, you know, a giant gym with like 30 pros on the mat at a time. And I'm glad I got the experience, because it kind of showed me that, you know, just because you go to the biggest gym, you know, in the area doesn't always mean it's the best fit for you. So now I'm training at Nick Diaz's Academy, which I think for my style is a really good fit for, you know, where I am. I love jiu-jitsu. I love Gracie jiu-jitsu, so I feel very, like, at home there. And then also I'm, like, really starting to hone in on my boxing skills. I've been going to, you know, Richard Perez and Felipe Martinez out there in Stockton and Manteca. So it's been so far really, really awesome the last couple of months training. I feel a lot more, like I said, comfortable and at home with that gym. But like I said, Team Alpha Male is a good gym. It's just, I think for me right now, with what I need and what my personal needs are, it just wasn't really fitting for me. So, yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're a young fighter. You're in I'd say the beginnings of your pro career. You've been Bellator for a couple of fights. You've got some amateur fights as well. So you definitely have a lot more road in front of you than you do behind you in this sport. And it makes perfect sense when you talk about some of these massive gyms. They're enormous, and you're not necessarily getting. I don't want to say the attention in a bad way, but I mean when you're at that point where you're, that pivotal point in your career where you need that, more hands-on, one-on-one stuff with your boxing or whatever you're focusing on. It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, and it's hard because I'm a very loyal. I'm not just saying this to say it, but I feel like I'm a very loyal person. It's really hard for me to make the move once I've gone somewhere and established myself with some friends and coaches. And it kind of stinks because I was I had a feeling kind of earlier on. I was I don't know if this is really working, or I don't know if I really feel super happy here. And I was kind of struggling a little bit financially too. And, to pay your coaches, it's expensive, right? You got to make sure that you're, paying everyone fairly and doing all that. So it's hard to keep up with on that front as well. But I really, like I said, when I left and I talked to you, right, there was no hard feelings there whatsoever. But I just kind of explained to him with where I'm at in my career, I definitely need a lot more one-on-one time, and that time over there is expensive. So where I'm at now, the people who are coaching me, they're we just want you to succeed and be happy and do your thing. And, we're not trying to ask for a ton from you right now. But, obviously, if things go as planned this year and, I do very well in the MMA, front and get my record up, then, then that's when we talk about, more money stuff with coaches. But right now I feel I'm trying to, get back on my feet and, have a winning record again and, do all that. So it's kind of unfortunate, the last two fights, how they've gone. It's obviously not gone my way. And that also puts pressure on things. I really have to win my next fight. It's kind of a last chance in a sense. If, I know what's at stake. If I don't win, I basically get cut. So, yeah, that puts a whole different, level of pressure on my career.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, obviously the last couple of fights not going your way, but from everything that I've seen and read and all the clips on the fights, it's not necessarily – they weren't blowouts from what I was seeing. I mean, you lose a decision in your last outing. Prior to that, the doctor stoppage where, definitely a hard fight in that first one. But, I mean, by no means – I saw worse beatings this past weekend. As we're recording this, last night was UFC 222 where Cyborg really had a one-sided victory. I mean, we're not talking anything like that. So I can understand where the pressure could get to you. And I look at the 125 weight class, the flyweights in Bellator, and aside from the champ, and at least on paper, you're not necessarily seeing tons of people run away with anything. It feels like it's still wide open for you, Brooke, where it's you can definitely, it's not necessarily oh, man, two losses in a row, one more, and you're going to get your walking papers. It looks like you were giving some really good efforts on it, and knowing that the state of this weight class is still in its early stages, too.
Yeah, and I've competed against Alimale before, so I even know what that feels like on the ground, and I feel they're – that's when I was wow, you know what I mean? When I competed against her, I was I'm really not that far off, and I feel my stand-up stylistically against hers would, pose some problems with her. But obviously I have to, focus on, whatever is next, because I know that fight necessarily isn't going to be next for me. But it definitely did, like you said, kind of open my eyes up to, just where the division is at as a whole. In the sense of I'm really not that far off. It's it's coming down to inches. I just need to close a few gaps and holes in my game, and I'm going to be right there along with them. But I got to really capitalize on the opportunities I'm given in my fights. And I think that's why I was just a little bit unhappy with myself in general. Was the last 2 fights, I just, I had opportunities there. I thought I had a fit.
Yep. Brooke, you still there? I thought I lost you for a moment.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, perfect.
Just been too far away. But, yeah, I just need to capitalize more on moments in my fights and my, capitalize on my grappling, exchanges, even my striking exchanges. So I think, like, this year for me, it was, like, a lot about, like, building my confidence back up in myself because, a couple of missed opportunities, you kind of, like, beat yourself up over it a little bit. You're like, oh, why did I do this? Or why didn't I do that instead? And you can kind of drive yourself crazy, like, nitpicking at yourself, like, oh, like, I should have done this here, should have done that. So it's funny, my mom's not a martial artist or, like, she's never done any martial arts, but in my first fight, she was like, Brooke, she's like, why didn't you just choke her? Like, she's like, why didn't you finish her, like, the first, like, round? I was like, Mom, I wanted to, I swear. I was like, but it's very intense. I was like, the SAP Center was pretty, electrifying in, like, the energy, and, I was fighting in front of 11,000 people in my pro debut. I was like, that's a lot, Mom. I was like, but I was cracking up because she was like, Brooke, the way she was talking to me, it reminded me of when I was playing soccer when I was a kid. She's like, Brooke, why didn't you, like, pass it? Or why didn't you score? Why didn't you do this? She was talking to me like that. It was my MMA career, so I was cracking up a lot. I'm like, Mom will always be Mom. It's great.
That always will. You're on like the big stage there. I mean, we're talking about some pretty big cards as well for Bellator. Your last couple of fights. So, I mean, this isn't some smaller regional type things in somebody's backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, how long have you been over in at the DS gym?
I want to say it's pretty recent, actually. It's only been a couple months, so I want to say like 2 or 3 months now.
Okay, so since after your last fight.
Yeah, I kind of after my last fight, I just was like, okay, I kind of like looked at the big picture, not just like the fight in itself and the cornering. I think my corners were doing a good job. I just looked at like my camp as a whole, and I thought it had gone really well. But there's things about it I didn't necessarily like, and then there's also life factors that were kind of, stressors during the camp. And I was like, okay, how do I eliminate some of this outside, of camp stress, and how do I kind of, put more energy into focusing just on MMA? I mean, it's tough because I'm not a full-time fighter yet. Like, I have jobs and other obligations, but really I was just like, okay, like what went wrong, like inside the gym, outside the gym, where am I living right now? Is it making sense? And then I was like, a lot of these things aren't making sense. And also it was like, even though it's a big team and you feel as if, that means you're going to have like lots of friends and really like click with people, I just felt like I felt a little bit, I don't know, like just kind of removed from the gym. Like I wasn't feeling like this home vibe, or like, oh, this is my home gym and I feel comfortable. So I was like, you know what, like I think I want to go back and kind of reevaluate this. And that's when I reconnected with my friends Chelsea Chandler and Victor Galdon. They're like, hey, like, you're great sparring for Chelsea. Like, you guys work really well together. You don't necessarily need like 30 partners. You need like, 1 to like 5 like quality partners. And so when I started training with her and the rest of the team, I was like, okay, like this feels comfortable. This feels like where I fit in. So I think that's like the biggest thing, I think, for fighters in general. Just because like everybody else seems to be having success in one area or at one gym doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be the best fit for you, and you don't have to force it.
Yeah, it's funny because, you think about Team Alpha Male. When you throw that name out there, you obviously think of how successful they've been in producing, really top-level fighters. And, well, I know I instantly think of Uriah and the big smile and all the camaraderie that they're saying over there. But I can absolutely see how, you've got a large group of people there. And so it's, oh, you're training a Team Alpha Male. What do you mean you're not training with Cody and with all of the big-name fighters over there? And I can see how it gets a bit, I don't want to say less homey, but you're not making that connection once it gets to a spot, where you're trying to break in, and these are big names that have been there forever, and they're on the top of their games.
Yeah, and all the big names were always super nice to me. Like, don't get me wrong, like, they were always, like, so cool, like, encouraging. Like, Cody would be like, good job, you're doing great in your sparring. Like, I was getting, like, some good feedback from them. But I think when it came to coaches and, the organization of training camps, it's really tough when you have Cody fighting and then Sarah McMahon fights next weekend, and then, Chad Mendes is going to fight 2 weeks later. So it's like you have a lot of people gone just because their gym is successful. They have so many guys on the UFC roster and girls now. So that's good for them, and I'm really happy for my friends who are fighting. And like I said, I'm still friends with all the people in that gym. I just think me fitting into that equation was, like, going to be tough, right? Because it's like I'm not a UFC fighter. I'm a Bellator fighter. And just the relationship there is just a little bit different with Bellator than the UFC. So I just think that, like, they have such a deep roster now. I think that eventually they're going to have to start getting some more coaches in there just for their amateurs and starting out, lower-level pros. Versus their, UFC team. It's like there's a lot of guys that are now coming into the gym that are, still amateur or only had one pro fight that are really good training partners for, like, the higher level guys, right? But at the same time, they do need their corners and their stuff for their training camps and their fights. But like I said, there's a lot that the coaches are doing and trying to do for everybody, and they're doing a really good job stretching themselves, so thin and trying to give everybody attention. But at the same time, like, those coaches are only one person. They can only get to so many people. So it's like it's going to be interesting to see, like, when the team continues to grow, like, how they're going to manage that, or, like, if people are going to have to personally take on the task of getting other people from outside to come in to, guide them a little more.
No, it makes sense. And as you described, your move to your new gym, and based on your style, from like I said, from what I've seen videos and from what I've read on articles and can see from your amateur history, it seems like the Diaz gym is a really good fit for that, strong ground game. Really, if you want to focus on boxing, I mean, I can't think of too many places that would be better than going and working there.
Yeah. It's cool because, like, even when I go and spar in there sometimes, they're, like, just doing little drills and doing little things that, like, Nate's been good and Victor have both been good about coming up to me and being like, hey, I like this, or, like, no, don't do that. Or, like, when I spar, like, and I'm sparring, Chelsea, who's a really great fighter, she's going to be fighting for Invicta actually soon, so I'm going to be cornering her for that. But when we're sparring, it's funny because even just little things I do that I don't see as problematic, they're like, no, like, we need to make this adjustment. And they're very, like, hands-on with me. And just the few tips that they've given me over the last, like, couple weeks have really changed my game tremendously, and they've really changed how I look at the fight. So I'm really hoping that my next fight, I'm definitely going to apply those, apply the things that they've been, telling me to do. And I think I'm going to become a lot more vicious and, like, a lot, not necessarily in an aggressive sense, but in a more smart and tactical sense, because a lot of people think, of Nick and Nate as just being, like, a fighter, but they're very tactical. They're very smart in how they fight. So I'm excited to kind of, like, emulate a lot of what they do in their fights and, become a lot more effective.
Well, yeah, you can see that, like, when you think of the Diaz brothers and that style of fighting, it's funny because, they're absolutely deadly on the ground. Their jiu-jitsu game is killer, but there's Nate is one of the best boxers in the game right now, and he's not a brawler, It's funny because they both kind of have, I think people have kind of described it as that, they're feeling you out, doing a lot of pity-pat punches. They're not throwing for the, trying to hit home runs with every single one, but they do have that ability to turn it up and really just, if they're hitting and connecting and turning it on. And it's, I don't want to say a way to also conserve energy, but you never ever see these guys gas. So, when you start talking about making these adjustments to your game, I think it's a great time in your career to do that. And, like I said, an awesome place to learn.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I had so many amateur fights. It was good in a sense, but it was also a little bit I don't want to use the word like detrimental, like, but it's a different mentality, right? You're going from a 9-minute fight to, you know, a 15-minute fight, and you need to figure out how to, and it's not necessarily conserving, but how to use your energy efficiently. So if, you know, let's say I go in there, you know, all out in the first round and then, you know, gas myself out, and then I still have 10 more minutes to fight, you know, that's not going to work. So I really am happy with, like, the change I've been making, like doing more long-distance cardio, like swimming, running, you know, a little bit longer, biking, all that stuff has really helped me. And then also, like, just focusing on, like, meditation and breathing, too, outside of the gym. Like, I've noticed that, like, in between rounds, I have a lot easier time, like, slowing my heart rate down, getting my breathing under control. Like, I've just also, like, been trying to just, like, not only strengthen my body, but, like, my mind, too. Like, you know, try to be smarter. You know what I mean? It's easy for, like, me to just go to default mode and be like, well, I'm athletic, I'm aggressive, I'm tough, you know, but there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm really trying to be smarter. I'm really trying to be a lot more efficient and effective with what I do, because, you know, if you're even just like a couple of centimeters off, you know, you're going to miss a big opportunity, right? So a lot of it's mental focus, and a lot of it's, still technique, because I really haven't been around that long in this sport. I mean, I want to say like 3.5 years of MMA experience really isn't that much in the big scheme of things. So I think right now, like, I'm going to start developing at a much quicker rate, because I've kind of gotten over the beginner hump, and, like, now I'm starting to get more intermediate with everything in terms of, like, skill levels. So I think you'll start to see, like, a lot more progression in, like, my MMA, like, technique, and just everything is going to be a lot sharper in the next couple months.
It sounds it. I mean, it sounds like you're hitting on all the right things. I mean, you know, I think I remember hearing an interview with Dan Hardy, or it may have been, I can't remember, somebody else maybe was saying it. They're talking about hitting pads and how one of their coaches every now and again would pull their hand back and make you miss, because when you're hitting pads and when you connect, you can really throw and hit hard. And they were, like, trying to prove the point of, you don't need to kill it every time, because when you are going to miss, you're never going to hit all your punches, and you use a lot of energy. So, like, when we were saying conserve it, where it's not necessarily conserve, I like the way you said more efficient and effective with your striking, because it's spending the appropriate amount of energy at the appropriate times. Because I think we have seen numerous fights over the years where somebody comes out in the first round and they clip them, and then they're just swarming for the kill, and then they gas out because they couldn't put them away, and then the second and third rounds they're done, you know? So that happens all the time.
Yeah, I think, too, it's like, it's kind of just about recognition, too, like, recognizing, you know, little things, like, okay, like the placement of, you know, their body, your body, also, like, what time is it in the round? Are you listening to your corners, right? Like, I'm one of those people that a lot of people tell me, they're like, I can't hear my corners at all. Like, I black out when I go into my fights. Like, I don't hear anything they're saying. But, like, I'm a corner that, like, or I'm a person that likes to hear their corner, and I'm kind of listening, like, hey, we got 30 seconds left in the round, or we got 10 seconds left, or, hey, like, you know, you're getting caught with this, move this way. Like, I actually try to really, like, hone in on, like, what my corners are saying. So I think it's, like, an awareness thing, too, like a lot of fighters miss out on, because, like, last night when I was watching the fights and Sean O'Malley, like, broke his toe or whatever happened, he's hopping around on one foot, and his corners are screaming, his opponent's corners are screaming, let him up, and the guy just keeps falling him to the ground and basically let him win because of that. And it's like, you really gotta be able to have good awareness, like, when you're fighting, and be able to listen and recognize what's going on. Because if you don't, you know, like, that's the difference between a win and a loss right there. So it's really
absolutely.
important.
It's funny. It can be something that, I'd say probably most people who are watching fights at any point overlook, you know, the amount of things that are going on. They're watching. Why don't you just go out there and punch them? Why don't you just throw that kick? Oh, they're leaving themselves open for this or for that. And then, they're missing the corner piece about how effective not only having the good corner, but I guess to your point, is actually listening to them.
Yeah. And it's like something you have to practice, and I think it's like a relationship you have to develop over time. Like, you might have a really good coach, like when you guys are in training or like one-on-one in your sessions, and then you get to the fight and that person, may not be very involved where you need them to be. So it's like the fighter, I feel like, needs to communicate what they need as a fighter. Because some fighters are like, hey, I don't need you to say anything. Like, don't say anything, and I'm going to do my thing. And some other fighters are like, hey, I need some guidance. Like, if you see me doing the same thing over and over again, you got to yell at me. Or, this is our code word for that. Or I don't know, whatever makes the fighter most comfortable or most effective. But you have to have, like, a good relationship with your corner, and you have to have it kind of figured out before it comes time to fight time. Because if you have like maybe two corners that don't get along too, and there's like an argument going on in the corner and they're not gelling, like that's a whole other issue too. So there's a lot of factors that viewers are watching and aren't really thinking about, but there's a lot of moving parts and components to what it takes to even just get to fight night. And make it effective and make it good.
I didn't even think about it, having your corner, a couple of people in your corner actually getting into an argument. I can't even imagine that. That's got to be awful.
Yeah, I think, man, I luckily I've been pretty lucky. Like, I've had corners that really, like, gel well together, and no one tries to take the alpha spot, or no one tries to, like, go too crazy, like, with, micromanaging the other corner or like, taking control of the situation. But I know that from experience and from watching some other fighters and some of my friends, like, try to, bring in very different people, two very different personalities that maybe don't see eye to eye or maybe weren't involved with the whole camp, it's kind of tough. It's definitely tough to manage. And I feel bad for those people because I'm like, wow, that's such a bummer. You know what I mean? Like, the coaches are trying to make it more about them than about the fighter. Like, they're, like, really arguing about, no, my way's the right way, and yada, yada, yada. I know
crazy.
Most and this and that. And you see a lot of that happen, like, especially when a fighter gets bigger. Like, a lot of people want to take credit, like, oh, well, I made this person, and that they wouldn't know anything without me. And I'm like, well, that person's the one getting in that cage in front of all these people and, putting it all on the line. So I understand where coaches are coming from. Like, hey, I helped them develop this, and I think that's cool. But I think sometimes they get a little too wrapped up in me, I did this, I did that, versus be team, team Brooke or be team Ortega or, whoever, right? Like, it seems like you can kind of tell whose coaches are just, like, all about their fighter, and they're not really focused on, like, their own accolades. So, and that's the people who have the most success.
Yeah, you can see, it's funny because you can see it where, like, if you could rattle off, you can rattle off some good coaches and some good camps, but I mean, when you talk about the best fighters, you could, bang out 20, 30 of them, and then their corresponding corners, maybe not. But when you talk about bad corners or bad coaching, I know a couple of names jump to my head about people that have, I guess I could make the argument that they took somebody down the wrong path, changed their career for better or for worse in the long run, but definitely gave them some immediate failure. So it's like when your corner isn't working, it's completely apparent.
Yeah. And it's like it's this whole, like, having the person's best interest at heart. And you see it all the time, like, the person that is more about, oh, you need to rep me, you need to rep my brand, me, versus the conversation where, hey, how are you feeling? Do you have everything you need? How, like, it's just the dialogue is much different, when you have someone that genuinely cares and wants you to be successful versus, they're only seeing their own success and their own paycheck. So I think a lot of fighters, and I should have been more aware of that from the get-go, like, of, the whole fight game and how a lot of people, they come at you and they tell you, I have your best interest at heart, I really care about you, versus, and then what their real intentions or what their real ideas behind that are. So I think a lot of fighters just need to be aware, you know, like if you have a bad feeling about something or maybe like someone, or if you're not fitting into a gym, it's okay to change things, you know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people are very afraid of change and are very afraid of you know, just moving on and like doing things that are beneficial for them, and because they don't want to be ridiculed or viewed as like a, you know, or like I've been called like, oh, you're a gym hopper. It's like, oh, well, I understand that I'm going to different gyms and I'm trying out, you know, different things right now, but I'm in a very, you know, pivotal time in my career where, you know, I really need that. Like, and I didn't know a lot about martial arts from the get-go getting into this, so now I'm starting to explore and see, like, what really works for me. So I think a lot of fighters just need to be a little aware of that. Like, you know, be aware of who you surround yourself with, and be aware of your own feelings and, like, you know, your own intuition on those things. Like, if it's working for you and you're really happy and you feel like you're going to be successful, great. If you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel good about the situation, like, you don't have to force it, you know, just for somebody else. So.
Yeah, I think with the amount of people that are getting into MMA these days, it's just growing because, you know, the sport is incredibly popular and gaining more and more exposure everywhere. It's definitely something for the newer folks as they're getting in. Hopefully they pay attention to that advice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they look at fighting, like they see, like I think, you know, you see the glamour and the big show and the UFC and all these guys, like, you know, completely killing it, and it's all like sunshine and rainbows, but I don't think we really touch on, you know, the real stuff all the time, which is, you know, the everyday struggle, you know, finding your camp, finding your manager, you know, surrounding yourself with people that are good for you and your particular needs, because every individual is super different, you know, like this isn't a one-size-fits-all sport, you know, and I don't think any sport really is anyways, but, yeah, it's just amazing to see, like, I mean, I transitioned from soccer, which is, you know, super team-oriented, you know, you listen to your coach, and your coach is your coach, and that's that, but now getting into MMA and, like, seeing, like, you know, how different everyone's style is, and, you know, like it's like we were talking about earlier, like everyone expresses themselves differently too in martial arts, and everybody's kind of like I said, your style kind of dictates like what you need, and it's good to kind of like change your style and kind of like evolve, but you are your own person, and that's kind of like how you fight is how you fight, and you can make changes to it, but like you're not going to completely do a 180, you know, necessarily from who you are as a fighter. So it's good to kind of like find something that works.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, and I think I always think of I know it's probably played out, but I think of Ronda Rousey when I think of that. You know, the skills that brought her the massive success she had was, you know, her judo, her ground game, you know, tenacity, and then toward the end kind of turning into, I don't know if she wanted to become a boxer or a striker, you know, the knockouts kind of, you know, getting a couple of them here or there, and then ultimately I feel like that's what did her in, maybe listening too much to people around her telling her that she's a knockout artist when, you know, maybe she did have some, you know, that kind of power, but she was not a knockout artist fighter. But to your point, you can't. She wasn't old by any stretch, but I mean, if you're coming brand new into the sport and you're trying to be very well-rounded in all aspects of striking and ground game, that's one thing. But if you've trained for years like she has with judo, I mean, she earned an Olympic medal. She got a silver medal, so she already did a bunch of time, and she's got that, like, you know, tattooed in her brain, that type of thing. She can close her eyes and do all of her throws and so forth, as opposed to trying to reprogram her brain to be a striker. Not that she can't add some technique and some skills there, but I think to your point, you can't be, you know, turn into Chuck Liddell overnight.
Exactly, and I think it's unfortunate what happened to Ronda, because I think she was so great for the sport. I think she was like a really strong female presence and really helped the sport, especially for women, a lot. So it was unfortunate to kind of see her go down like a different path and kind of have somebody in her corner that was kind of convincing her that, she's now a boxer and is, like, able to strike with the best boxers in the world. And it's, like, it's kind of crazy that even occurred, right? Because if you're a black belt in a martial art like judo or jiu-jitsu, like, how long it takes to develop those skills. It takes years, like thousands of hours on the mat, and like a lot of discipline. So I was very shocked that even happened, where she was convinced that she could box with, black belt level quote-unquote boxers after not having that much boxing experience. I was like, wow, I'm very shocked that you were able to be convinced of something like that when you've already known what it's taken to get your black belt in judo, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's just a very different, like, psychological, like, phenomenon that's going on there. But it's crazy. I mean, it just shows you, though, that, your mind can be a powerful thing, right? Like, you can really convince yourself of a lot of things. And I think also, too, she knocked out Betch Kohea, so that was probably another thing she was coming off that really affected her mindset when it came to the Holly Holm fight. So.
Oh, absolutely. Like, she was fed Betch, who's, Betch isn't, a bad fighter. She's in the top, the top categories. And when you think about, all of the populace of the world. But, I mean, in terms of, she's not at the same level as Ronda. So then all of a sudden maybe Ronda's thinking she's better than she is. And then you go up against somebody like Holly Holm, who's absolute pinnacle of world class and striking. And, you just fed right into it. It was the perfect storm. It was like, they always say styles make matchups. And that one was definitely, hindsight's 20/20. I mean, Ronda goes in and steamrolls Holly. Nobody ever thinks, wow, I'm surprised it didn't happen. But, I mean, you look back and you go, Holly is a counter striker with incredible movement, great kicks, great legs. Her hands are great. And then you see what she did, and you're like, well, yeah, well, no kidding, it happened. That was perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just, no. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, no matter what happened to Ronda, she had a bad last couple of fights in the UFC, and obviously, people will, I think over time will remember her as that pioneer, as that person who broke the glass ceiling, who enabled all of the female fighters that are on all of the rosters now. I mean, there's more talent now than ever before, and they can thank Ronda as well as several others for that. There were several others that came over as well. But she's doing pretty damn good right now with the WWE, so I don't feel too bad for her. She didn't have anything to prove in MMA. She did her thing. She's a Hall of Famer, and she's probably doing pretty well over there doing her wrestling thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, that seems to be, like, quite the gig, Like, you make a good chunk of money doing that. So I'm happy for her, too, that she's, she's getting paid. She's comfortable. She has, she has a husband. She's, like, building her own life. So that's good that she had, such success after, MMA, because, who knows, for some other people it could have been very different, So
absolutely.
She definitely had some good people around her.
Yeah, and what you were saying before was like, people, when we were talking about new people coming into the sport, they see the glitz and the glamour. They see Ronda, they see Brock Lesnar, they see Conor McGregor, they see lots of money. Yeah. Where we were talking before, where you were saying, you're not a full-time fighter, so you got a job. There's lots of fighters, maybe yourself included, have multiple jobs to try to make it work. And it goes a long way before you can get to that point where you're like, I'm going to quit my job and just focus 100% on fighting. And, Ronda's like, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but I mean, getting down to that level of money that she was making, good for her, but, that's the kind of thing you can't really put that in your game plan.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's a lot of obstacles that people aren't really aware of. Like, I mean, for me, it's like I've always had 2 to 3 jobs, trying to juggle part-time jobs around my training schedule, around sleep. You know what I mean? It's like there was times this year that, like, I would barely get any sleep just because I was bartending, and then I would go fly, and then I'd be like, okay, I need to make 9 a.m. practice, or I need to get my cardio in, and I was, like, running on, like, only a couple hours of sleep. And another thing, too, it's like, trying to find a place to live at an affordable price so you can juggle your jobs and training and doing all that. So I definitely learned, like, through experience this year that a lot of that stuff's really tough, and it poses a lot of challenges, like I said, and it can definitely, like, stress you out a little bit. So that's why I kind of made the decision. I'm like, all right, like, you know, this isn't working out for me. I got to call my mom and be like, hey, Mom, can I come home for a little bit? And luckily, like, my parents are so cool. Like, they know that, like, I'm a hard worker. They know that that I'm really committed to my sport. Like, they know that just my level of commitment is super high, so they're like, yeah, totally, you need a little help now. Like, and they've seen me from, like, you know, like I said, like, when I was an amateur and had friends in my corner, till now where I'm fighting on the Bellator card. So, like, I think they're starting to kind of believe in it a little bit more. It was a little bit of a hard sell when I was an amateur. Like, hey, Mom, I'm going to do something with this. No, you're not. You're not going to do anything with this crap, you know? I'm like, no, I am. I swear, I know I am. And so then when I started fighting for Bellator, she was like, okay, I see it now. But yeah, I'm lucky that I have, you know, parents that can, you know what I mean, like, give me a place to stay while I, like, figure things out. I'm super lucky, but, you know, like I said, there's not a lot of fighters that, you know, have that. Like some people, like, I did this year too. I was couch surfing. I was, you know, sleeping on people's couches, like, during training camp. Like, didn't have a place, you know, didn't have a place to live. Like, it's very crazy and very hectic and chaotic, you know, and, like, when you don't have a steady place to live, it's also, like, how are you going to cut weight? That's another thing people don't think about. It's like, okay, you got to cut 20-something pounds of weight, but you don't have a kitchen to cook your own food in. It's like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, no, see, that's the thing. You're absolutely right. You know, you hear all these horror stories about some of these fighters who don't have these things. You know, and you know, it sounds like you're very fortunate in some regards, and it's not that you're not paying your dues either. So I don't want to belittle it, but it's funny. Sometimes people could look at you and look at your situation, and, you know, there's different judgments about you know, using what you have available to you to help you along your path. And it's kind of like, I think, well, that'd be kind of stupid not to, wouldn't it? You know, if I've got this somebody who's, whether they're your parents or a friend, you've got a best friend who's going to help you out, or a coach or whatever. It's like, they're here to help. I'm going to try to be a good person. I'm going to take advantage of the situations and you know, learn as much as I can to kind of stack your chips and move forward.
Yeah, and that's another thing, too. Like, my friend Chelsea's been so nice about during training, like, when I'm in Stockton, she's like, hey, just stay here for a couple nights. Like, and at first I was like, Chelsea, are you sure? Like, I feel so bad, you know? Like, I don't want to ask that of you. Like, I can, you know, I can always go. And she's like, no, like, you could stay. You're my teammate. You're my friend. Like, and that's what's made me feel so at home there, too, is just having that, like, having her be so helpful. But there's times where I feel uncomfortable, you know, like, asking for help or, like, receiving help from people. I'm like, oh, I just feel so guilty. Like, I should be the one helping them. And, you know, I kind of do that to myself because that's just how I think sometimes. But then I started to realize, you know, if you need help, you know, you should accept the help where it is, because you never know, like, where you're going to be in a couple of months. Maybe you'll be in a position, like, maybe, you know, a couple months, like, things turn around for me. I'm going to be in a position to be helping a lot of people. And when that happens, I'm going to remember all the people that have helped me up until this point, and I'm going to, you know, return the favor in any way I can. So, and also, too, it's like, with that type of help, it's like, I think it's just being a good friend and being a good parent, and, you know, opening those doors for people. They're not necessarily, like, going out and, like, holding my hand and doing everything for me, but just little things like, you know, having a place to lay my head at night is, like, something that I've really, really, like, appreciated and, like, started to really, you know, like, that for me is huge. Like, I'm a minimalist when it comes to stuff. Like, you know, I don't need a very nice fancy car, and I don't need a big fancy place to stay. Just, like, a consistent place to lay my head, and a consistent, you know what I mean, like, little beater that can get me from point A to point B is fine. You know, like, you don't need stuff. And so when people get into fighting, they're like, oh, I'm going to be rich and famous and do all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I never really fought with the intention of, like, making millions and millions of dollars. Like, I just fought because it does something for my soul. Like, it just makes me feel good to get out there and fight and to just get lost in the sport and express myself in martial arts in a really special way that's unique to me. So, I mean, yeah, money definitely helps, and resources help a lot. Like, if you
Absolutely.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it doesn't help, but I'm like, and if you have money and if your parents, like, totally can, like, front the bill, like, dude, take that and run with it, you know? Like I said, my parents give me a place to stay, but they're not necessarily, because I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so they're not necessarily able to be like, here, Brooke, here's money, go train, you know, and don't work. Like, that's not the situation I'm in by any means. I don't want people to get confused by that. But,
yep, good clarification there. Good clarification.
Yeah, but I definitely, like, you know, I think the struggle is good. It definitely, like, grounds you. It definitely keeps you, you know, hungry. It keeps you, like, you know, not, I don't want to say, like, you don't want to be desperate, and there's been times where, like, I've maybe accepted fights or fought out of desperation because I'm like, hey, shoot, like, I don't know, you know, when my next job's going to be. Like, my flight attendant job is part-time, so if I don't have work for my flight attendant job, like, I'm definitely, like, financially hurting for a fight. So I'm trying to do this thing where I'm like, okay, like, try not to think about the money. Like, do it if it makes sense logistically. You know what I mean? So
yep. That's a huge factor. I don't think people, you know, I don't think people get that, where it's like, when you fight, you get paid, and you get paid proportionately. And I'm oversimplifying. If you are, you know, a world champion, you know, you're going to get world champion money. Like we'll use Bellator people instead of going to the UFC.
Yeah.
But people so Matt Mitrione is getting Matt Mitrione money. Brooke Mayo is getting Brooke Mayo money. They're not the same kind of thing here, you know. It's just, so then in whatever that amount is, you're only getting it when you fight. So when you think about, like, people with regular jobs, or I guess less commission-based jobs, you know, they're getting a paycheck each week or every other week or however the pay cycle is. You know, the work is there for them all the time. You know, it's like if you own your own, you know, landscaping business. If people aren't having you come and take care of their lawn, you're going to get paid.
Yeah.
So with that, when thinking about what's next for you in time, like timing, you know, if you know an opponent that you would like to match up with, I'd love to hear it. If not, then maybe, or if there's too many of them, you'll take whoever, whatever. What's your timing like? Because your last fight was what? I want to say September, if I'm right.
September, yeah. I've definitely been, like, so, like, hurting to fight. You know, people have no idea because, like I said, I'm in a financial position where, you know, my flight attendant job's inconsistent, and then my fighting up until this point has been, to me, very inconsistent. Like, I'm a person that likes to get into a rhythm and fight every couple months, and right now I'm fighting, like, every 6 to 8 months, which bums me out. So at this point, like, I don't really want to say, like, particulars with, like, names, but I mean, like, just anybody really in the division I feel like I match up stylistically well with. Like, because I fought Vita in my first fight, and she's, like, you know, she's up there in the mix, and she's fought a lot of the girls on the roster. So, honestly, like, I can see myself fighting anybody she's really fought, even rematching her one of these days. I mean, I don't know if that will ever happen or come to fruition, but I really think I deserve a rematch there, especially because I did not want to stop that fight, like, whatsoever. And I, like, even when she hit me, like, I still came forward and took her down and did my thing. So I keep fighting her. And, you know, in the future, I know a lot of people, like, have named, like, you know, Heather, like, on my Instagram and say, oh, you should fight Heather. But, I mean, Anna Juliton, who she just fought, it would probably make sense to fight her even. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just tough, you know, because I'm an 0-2 fighter, and I want to say I'm a relatively good grappler, and I think some people see that as a threat. So, or a well-rounded fighter, however people view me. So it's kind of hard, I think. It's a hard sell, I think, for Bellator right now. I feel bad for them. I'm like, thanks for keeping me on, guys. Love you. I know you're having probably a really freaking hard time trying to find opponents maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it's a tough thing. So I mean, I offered to fight at a higher weight class, even if that was helpful to them matchmaking. I'd be willing to go to 35 and fight. I'm starting to get bigger, so I'm like, you know, I'm trying to, like, kind of play around with my weight cutting right now and, like, my weight in general. So I could see myself being one of those fighters that can possibly fight in 2 weight classes down the road. Then I know that they're really focusing on their flyweight division, but it looks like it left a lot open at the bantamweight division because of, the big surge to flyweight.
Yeah, you see that happen, obviously in the UFC, they open up the flyweights, and then all of a sudden you get some 115, you get strawweights jumping up, and then you've got the 135ers dropping down, a couple here and there, but it absolutely makes sense when there's a gap like that. But all things being equal, do you feel most comfortable at 125? At least for now, anyway.
For now, yeah. I mean, it's a really tough weight cut. It takes a lot out of me. And like I said, with the factors of me not being a full-time fighter and me, having an inconsistent living situation this year and, having a lot go on, outside of just camp itself and outside of fighting. It was tough for me to cut down to that weight. I walk around at 148, and I'm 5'8", so... And I feel like at 148, I'm not necessarily super, super fluffy. I'm relatively lean, so it is hard for me to get down to that weight. To me, it's like a full-time job if I'm doing that. So I can see it if my life circumstances were a little bit different, how it could be very, very I wouldn't say easy. Weight cutting is never easy, but it can be a lot less difficult. You know what I mean? If I have the rest of my life dialed in, but it's when I'm trying to work, 3 jobs and I'm trying to cut 23 pounds or whatever it is, it can be really challenging, especially as a woman too.
Yeah, I absolutely could see that. You see more and more fighters kind of going up a weight class instead of taking the cuts, and they feel like they're more energetic. They're recovering faster. They just feel more natural at a higher weight class. And, there's a couple of big names like Dos Anjos, was a very successful 155er, went up to 170, and he's very successful now. He's knocking on the door of a title shot there. Cowboy Cerrone's another one. I absolutely could feel what you're saying in terms of weight cutting. That's a tough one. It really is. It's difficult, when you're just trying to get, I'm feeling for you, when you're just trying to say, you know what, I'm ready to fight again. You can throw me a fight at either weight class. I think hopefully things, you get the call, you get a fight. Oh, it'd be great if you get one out here on the East Coast so we could see it here.
Yeah. That's what I've been, it's funny because I've had a lot of people say that. They message me and they're like, oh, we want you to fight on the East Coast so bad. It'd be so cool to see you. I have really cool fans, it seems from all over the United States. And sometimes, when I'm traveling for my flight attendant job, I get to even, stop and, say hey and, meet people and, connect with people. So it's been pretty cool. But, yeah, I would love to fight on the East Coast and, kind of get out of San Jose. Seems like I've had some not the best luck in San Jose, so it'd be nice to kind of hop over to the East Coast and, get a different look,
That would be awesome. Yeah, well, they got fights right down the road from me here in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun in Uncasville. They just, I think that's where the Mitrione and Nelson fight was. So they're always coming back here. So I'll have to keep my eyes open on that.
I know. So that fight. Okay.
No kidding.
Yeah, I was at Heather's fight against Christina. I was there for work for my flight attendant job, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go, shoot over to the Bellator fight for the Mohegan Sun. I saw Heather fight Christina, and that was super intense. And then ended up jamming out of there right after that fight and going seeing her, making sure she was okay. And luckily she was great, and fought really quickly after that, so that was good.
So you've came into what, Bradley? The international airport?
We flew into New Jersey. So, and then I took the train over, so it was I took the train for a couple hours over. But it was cool because, I got to kind of see a lot of the East Coast, even though I was only there for a couple days. I was in New York, New Jersey, went over to Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, kind of got to see a little bit of everything. And then we flew over to Boston. So I love the East Coast. It's really pretty. It's a lot different from what I'm used to, and that's what's nice is I get to kind of experience that through my job.
Oh, very cool. Well, I'll tell you what, the next time I'm talking with Scott Coker, I'll tell you, hey, let's try to get Brooke over here on the East Coast.
Yeah, put in a good word for me.
Yeah. He's not returning my call, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Brooke, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. But before we wrap things up, is there any social media? I know you've got a great Instagram account. I follow it. It's bmayo, Mayo 1313. So listeners, please find her on Instagram and follow her. Is there any other social media sponsors or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so you could also go to my Facebook page. It's Brooke the Bully Mayo. And then Twitter, there's Brooke13_Mayo is my Twitter account. And then just want to thank my sponsors. I have a few of them. Sorry, I'm going to rattle them off really quick. Lana's Egg White, NorCal Fight Shop. I have Theramoose, my new CBD sponsor. They're awesome. North Park Soap Co. Forearm Strong. I also have the Iron Neck, which you guys, if you're fighters or you play any sport, you guys got to look into that. And then I got Tridelta. They're my new clothing sponsor. They're doing awesome. And then Impact Mouth Guards. And I feel like I've forgotten people. But if I forgot anybody, I'm sorry. I'm going to post for you this week anyways. Oh, Crank's Naturals is my supplement sponsor. So, yeah, those are my main people.
Cool. So what I'll do is, I'll make sure we tag those folks. It's been fantastic having you on, Brooke. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on you. Got my fingers crossed for you so you can fight real soon. And maybe we'll have you back on the show down the road.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been great.
And that's a wrap, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, follow me on all of those fun social media platforms. And check Brooke Mayo out as well. She is at bmayo1313 on Instagram. Check her out. Enjoy it. And seize the day, people. I'll be back soon with more. Take it easy, people.
Time to waste. Life can be so miserable if all you have is a foul taste. There's too much out there.